Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Geekwatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have 1, 2, 3 good brothers. We have the alleged Jean Schimmel impersonator, and the man guiding you through all of your VTubers, all of your anime, while wearing star-shaped sunglasses. Good brother John.
It can't be alleged at this point. I've had so many people tell me I sound like fucking Goku. At this point, it's all but confirmed.
Oh, we have the biggest Kefka apologist in the room, good brother Monarch.
Did nothing wrong.
Do you have sand in your boots?
Not anymore. I got that cleaned up.
And the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadare Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
The Dari Enterprises legal team has reminded me that I can't call them a bunch of assholes on air, and I told them to shut the fuck up. They also told me that I can't perjure myself, so I can't say that we don't not, or I can say that we don't not have a lolly division, but you'll have to check that for yourself.
I would like to remind some of the people who may be watching this that we are just a few weeks away from National Throw Short People Day.
And I have ways and tonics of making myself even taller, so don't tempt me.
Well, you have to be under. You are eligible if you're under 5'6".
I'm going to use a relative scale and make everybody an inch short.
So just keep that in mind if you see me breaking out the catapult, because I believe in giving people flying lessons. The landing lessons, that's another story.
They won't see me coming. I will ninja my way up as I do. 6.5 foot tall, or 6.5 foot tall ninja, and then they'll just go flying, and they won't know what happened.
Have I mentioned in the past that I seem to have a talent for sneaking up on people without trying to?
Yeah, I believe we both showed that at Cowtown, in fact, and the reason for that is we follow the words of Teddy Roosevelt: walk softly and carry a big stick.
True, though. I think Kay had said that it's quiet footsteps in my case.
Yeah.
Like maybe I should wear hard top shoes like I'm Ray Charles or some shit. But I'd like to open up this week with a bit of a joke for you. So, Joss Whedon, George R.R. Martin, and Tomino walk into a bar. Everyone's character dies.
That seems a little light for them.
I was gonna say.
Everyone's character dies, and the bodies are impaled. But,
okay.
So is that more sufficient?
Well, I thought it was going to be everybody's characters die, and then Joss Whedon and George R. R. Martin die too, because it's kill 'em all.
Kill them all, Tomino.
Yeah. The running gag of certain authors killing off characters to make things to demonstrate how dark of a situation things are, or how serious the situation is nothing new, but when you do it enough times, it becomes infamous.
Need I remind everybody of Tomino literally destroying a universe and everyone in it at the end of Ideon?
Mm-hmm. And of course, the reason why Leomon and Lancer don't walk into a bar is because they're already dead.
You're not wrong. But it's still a low blow for Lancer. Come on now.
Is it really that much of a low blow when Carnival Phantasm made the joke multiple times?
Nasu is allowed to make jokes about their universe, Monk, but it's still a low blow.
Well, I don't believe in hitting a man while he's down. I believe in kicking him because that's easier.
Okay, fair enough. We'll gay bulg him when he's down.
Phrasing.
I know what I said.
But today's topic is someone who can be as guilty of that, but there's often a method to the madness. Though, as bad as much of that running joke is a thing, it's something that seems to have down back as time has gone on. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are covering Gen Urobuchi, the man who has gotten the nickname the Urobutcher, which is why I had to give it the title "Welcome to the Butcher Shop," and specifically asked for a meat market for the background.
And that's why I referred. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, like I was really gonna disagree with that idea.
And that's also why I referred to this episode about being in an abattoir. For those of you who don't know what an abattoir is, you've got Google.
Yep. Google that fucker.
Just Google that fucker.
And I would be remiss if I did not share a particular image I tweeted a few days ago with the rest of you. Check the council. I'm going to hell for laughing at that, but I don't care.
I've seen that one before. I laughed at it then, too.
I know it's a translation thing, but it's much like the town of Fuking. Just embrace the meme.
Just accept what you've created.
Or as came up on one of our last streams, the glorious Beaver Dick Park.
I don't know if I hate the fact that exists or the fact that there is a reason why it exists.
You just gotta accept it. Anyway, let's get back on the rails before we get too far here, because I have a bit of a love for Gen Urobuchi's work, and as Monk alluded to, while he doesn't exactly have the high body counts of Kill 'Em All Tamino or George R. R. Martin. What I think makes Gen Urobuchi stand out is that he has his body count has a purpose behind it. 9 times out of 10, if he's killing off characters left and right, there's a fucking reason for it, and he makes sure that those deaths mean something.
Yeah. And he's been around for a lot longer than people think. I'd say a lot of people, their introduction to him was either Madoka or I was gonna say Fate Zero, but the novel version of that wouldn't be translated for a while, so it's a case of chicken and egg, or for the Toku fans, Kamen Rider Gaim. But his earliest work was all the way back in 2000 with Phantom of Inferno. He wrote it, he directed it, and in some of the ports, he was the scenario and voice supervisor.
I'm going to reveal exactly how much of a degen I am here. My introduction to Gen Urobuchi was Demon Bane.
Which, let me see what year Demon Bane came out.
2003.
Yep. So that would have been a little bit later.
No, the reason it reveals how much of a degen I am is because it combines things that maybe would be better left not combined, like the fact that Demon Bane is not just a giant robot, but is also an eldritch horror, like one of the strongest eldritch gods in the scenario.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's all of the tentacle mishaps for those who know. If you know, you know.
Mm-hmm. And
We're talking about Japan and tentacles. I think you know where this is going.
I think one of the weirdest things that he's done in his visual novel run was Emblem of the Sacred Flame, which was a Equilibrium fanfic.
Yep.
And I know some people say one of the weirder things was like Saya no Uta or something like that, but no. And I know some people will bring up, what about Psychopaths? Well, I put Psychopaths with him in the same category as I put Forze and Drive with Riku Sanjo. They were involved with the writing, but they weren't the primary voice.
It's why I didn't put it in the splash screen. It just didn't make sense. Whereas stuff like Alno Zero was all him.
Yeah.
I will not get into how Aldnoah Zero tricked everyone with fantastic music into a mediocre mecha anime.
It's not the first time I had that happen. I had that happen with Brain Powered.
No,
Yeah.
brain powered is fantastic. You take that back, Monk.
I'll think about it.
Well, no, he's
He said sarcastically.
yeah.
Like brain powered was an interesting concept, and I thank it for existing. But it's better in Super Robot Wars J than it is in anime form.
Although that's not exactly narrowing it down much. There's a lot of stuff that was met in anime form that got a second chance in Super Robot Wars.
And there
Yeah,
are things
pretty
that
much.
originated in Super Robot Wars that then got turned into mecha anime. Hello, Majin Kaiser and Shin Getter.
But the thing is that his reason for getting into visual novels is largely the works of Leaf, namely Shizuku and Kizuato.
Mhm.
And a lot of people he's become the guy at Nitro Plus, but he's only the director there. He's not the president. That's still Digitaro.
Well, and I
Yeah.
don't think Urobuchi is trying to ever be the president. He likes making stuff.
And if he were the president, he wouldn't have as much opportunity to that.
Yeah. There are some people who are meant to be businessmen, and there are some people who are meant to be creators. Gen Urobuchi is a creator through and through.
And there was one thing on his writing style on the wiki that I did want to dive into and get your guys' thoughts on this particular pattern of his. Quote, in choosing names for the characters he develops, Urobuchi has stated that he shies away from selecting generic names that would match their personalities and instead opts for more unusual names that he believes would eliminate noise when fans try finding information on the characters with search engines. In a discussion with Urobuchi, manga writer Kazuo Koike contrasted this decision with the naming style in his own works, which emphasized more forthright names that were easier to remember. However, he found Urobuchi's method could be effective for allowing viewers to, quote, involve themselves deeper into the story and actively work to understand the characters, end quote. Urobuchi also said that he attempts to keep at least one trait in common between each individual character and himself so that he can always identify with them on some level.
I can see that. Most of his characters' names are absolutely constructed for SEO. Because that's essentially what he did, is SEO.
Yeah. Which, you know what? It works. I mean, a lot of this is something that I think a lot of American fans probably wouldn't understand as much because we don't use naming conventions the way that Japan does. Japan tends to have names that often describe aspects of them. Yeah, hold on, give me a second here.
Night.
My son's going to bed. But a lot of times, if you look at the name of a character in a show, in an anime, you already have a general idea of what their personality is going to be or certain characteristics that they're going to have just from their name alone. I mean, especially if you're in Japan and you understand how that works, you already know a lot just seeing the name. Urobuchi tries to avoid that and instead focuses on stuff that makes you want to know the character. Like, who is this person? Helps you get more invested is kind of what he's getting at.
Yeah. And then, of course, like I said, the other side of that is SEO. Since it's unique, hitting it with just one part of the name is going to be much easier than the next of the thousands of Harutos or Makotos or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I know a lot of popular names, including one of the most popular, Taro.
Yeah.
And if we did a drinking game out of the number of times we saw a character named Sakura,
We'd be dead.
We'd be dead. And
Yes.
For failure.
And of course, even when it comes to some of those common names, even Urobuchi's not immune to it. I mean, even he has a Sakura in his works at least once. But I'd say the other thing with that is that a lot of the idea of having that sort of inference with names is nothing new per se, but it's something that's a bit of a balancing act, because if you have to have it where it's there but it's not obvious, because otherwise that can undermine your story.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like, for example, at this point, if you name your character Hojo and he's a villain, you failed because everybody knows Hojos are bad guys.
Except for Hojo Emu, but that's because he's an MC.
Well, why do you think Parado had to be a thing? So they could have something close to a Hojo that's a villain ish.
No, I'm pretty sure that was more a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing, Monk.
I know, but let me be pedantic.
Okay, be pedantic then. You don't see me stopping you, just feigning it, that's all.
Yeah. But like, I think we've all seen that, especially with older, maybe golden or silver age, heroes in comics where their civilian name is trying to be generic, but it's not quite working.
I get what you're getting at. There are some that are pretty generic, although, and became not generic by being associated with comic characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can tell you right now that before Superman was given the name Clark, I'm pretty sure Clark was a fairly nondescript name.
Yeah.
Now there's an expectation to it.
Honestly, one of the big ones I go with when it comes to this whole playing your hand is Green Arrow. Having the civilian name of Oliver Queen.
Yeah. It's a bit posh, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I almost said that in received pronunciation for the joke, but I thought it wouldn't be fun.
And if I want to further pick on DC with this, Diana Prince. You know I'm
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just, there needs to be the sigh of, yep, right there. It's just how it works.
Now, obviously for the longest time, the big thing that Urobuchi was known was for being in that club of killing off characters. I did hear in a interview a long time ago that he has a dislike of happy endings, which you can kind of see because there's a lot of bittersweetness in how he does endings. I would say it's not exactly bad end, but he does seem to like tragedies.
Well, I mean, you don't really need to look any further than the end of the original run of Madoka for that.
I was about to say, yeah. And even in the later movies, it still carries that bittersweet tragedy going on.
I'd go one.
I mean, we haven't seen the new movie yet. Oh, right, yeah.
Tsukihime. Which he did have some tangential involvement with, but I specifically remember hearing that in regard to Fate Zero, because as dark as the anime could get, the light novel was worse, much worse. Especially anytime Bluebeard is involved.
This is me just laughing because yes. But there is a movie that he worked on that I think doesn't have a bittersweet ending. It actually has a really nice ending. It's also really well done, and because it is also mecha and thus panders to all of us, all four of us. I'm sure of it. No, I don't know what you Expelled from Paradise, or Rakuen Tsuiho. Fantastic mecha movie done in stunning, some really stunning CG for 2014. It's a CG anime movie that I think everyone should watch because it is that fucking good.
Which is saying something, because you know how I am regarding CG anime. I'm usually not a fan.
Well, I have Rakuen Tsuhiho, and we can watch it anytime you want, Monk, or you can put it on the wheel.
I will certainly think about it. Let's see, Expelled from Paradise. Yeah, I remember seeing fan art of this one, all over the place.
It's super good. It's a fantastic movie and a fantastic story, and I think you'll like it because it has a lot of the things we like about some of our favorite space western anime, Monk. Mm-hmm. Just also with mecha.
Now, there's one particular story that has been circulated, and I do want to note this is a grain of salt thing. So keep that in mind when I tell this story. Since I personally I've heard it passed around, but I personally haven't been able to confirm it. And given the secretive nature of the creative process in Japan, I don't think I ever will. But supposedly there was several mangaka and writers were invited to a charity event at a hospital. Now, according to the story, one of the people who was involved was Toriyama, who didn't show because of some payment issue. Supposedly. But one of the people who was there was Gen Urobuchi, and his experience with somebody who was with this kid who was waiting on certain operations. It's not clarified. Was one of the influences for Charlotte in Madoka Magica. Again, I don't have any confirmation about it, but there's circumstantial things that line up, especially given Charlotte's labyrinth within episode 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
But what I get out of that is that even if Urobuchi has a preference for tragedy and for a bittersweet ending, it isn't done to shock. And that's the key. No. That's the key difference. I think the reason Tomino's death count became such a meme is because of the fact that the deaths end up happening in rapid succession at the tail end of his works.
But the issue I have with that one, notwithstanding Ideon, because Ideon, like I said, killed the universe at the end of its run. There's a reason for that. Watch Ideon if you want to know why. But a lot of Tomino's works have always been war stories. And as wars ramp up, people die. Especially if they're people on the front lines. So a lot of people dying near the ends of a lot of his works. Let's just look at the end of Mobile Suit Gundam, the original, Grandpa Gundam. There's that entire giant battle for Abo Q. It's... Of course a bunch of people are going to die. And war is senseless killing, and Tomino was ostensibly trying to make a war story that said war bad in a nuanced way, but also doing it through the haze of his antipathy towards mankind at the time.
I think that's what ends up undermining the intent is that particular mindset.
I don't think you can really blame Tomino, though.
Given the circumstances, I don't.
No.
Yeah. And he's calmed down.
Don't blame him, but it is what it is.
Yeah, he calmed down as time went on, too. Less people began dying. Some of his stories had a lot more hope. And he's kind of just become crotchety old grandpa rather than I'm a grandpa that hates the world.
You mean like Miyazaki?
and yet still he's not as crotchety or cynical as Miyazaki is.
Yeah, but Miyazaki is cynical because he thinks he's an auteur that no one can touch his artistic, his artiste soul when it comes to his expression, and everybody else is lesser.
Including his own son.
I don't think Goro
Did Goro
is
ever do anything beyond Earthsea?
No, he wasn't ever allowed to. At least I don't think so. I'd have to check that.
Earthsea,
But,
I mean, considering that was his first work, it's like, it turned out okay.
It turned out okay for anyone who never read the books.
Well,
Yeah.
I remember Le Guin saying that she had issues with it, but she didn't have nearly as many issues as she did with, say, the sci-fi run.
We don't talk about the sci-fi run, Monk.
we don't bring that up. But yeah,
I still feel that pain in my gizzard to this day.
There's things I'm happy I completely missed out on.
yeah. Getting back on topic here, getting back to Urobuchi though, when it comes to his deaths, like when he kills somebody off, he makes sure that each death has a meaning behind it. Like it's meant to first of all, it is meant to give it an emotional reaction, but not just shock. The tragedy comes from seeing how they built that character up. And I think the best example of a character that fits this description is Sayaka from Madoka Magica. You see how much joy and hope she has in her life, and then you just see all of that hope and joy get drained away from her when everything she wanted is given to her and then is taken immediately away. And you see that pain that she develops so that when she finally snaps and has to be killed off, it hurts.
I'd imagine what ended up helping when it came to something like Madoka, and this is the reason why everyone who tried to repeat it ended up failing, is if you cast your mind back to the marketing for Madoka Magica. If you didn't know any better, you would have assumed it was just another magical girl anime.
And hell, even the first 2 episodes kind of still give you that vibe. Like there's something darker there, but it didn't feel any different than any other magical girl series. It's not until episode 3 that he finally shows his hand.
Yeah, don't lose your head about it, though.
No, definitely not.
No need to run around like chickens with their heads cut off about this.
Yeah. And great, now you've got Queen stuck in my head, Zan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because there can be only one.
There can be only one.
And
she's certainly not a blonde bombshell.
I don't know, it's a kind of magic.
It's truly the fat bottom girls that make the rock and world go round, though, Mike.
Also, since we're bringing this up, I have to share. You've probably seen this, but I'm going to share it anyway because it's just too good to not bring it up. Let me go ahead and just head over to the council real quick. Who remembers this old gem?
I feel at this point it
I've
might not
seen
even
that
be
meme.
worth finally going back and watching Madoka Magica, because I skipped it because I'm like, it looks like a magical girl anime. But so much of it's kind of been spoiled for me at this point. I'm like, I think any of the impact of all that happens just isn't going to be there anymore.
Oh, it will be.
Unfortunately. It will still be there to some extent if you haven't watched any Magical Girls in forever and you haven't seen a lot. If you skipped the era of the dark Magical Girls that came after it, then it probably would still get you like, whoa, shit. Because we haven't spoiled too much.
Wants to watch Magical Girl site? No, thank you.
Oh, I've already had so much of that show spoiled for me at this point.
Oh, that for me is that from my perspective is just going to be a skill issue.
Look, I wasn't trying to avoid anything about that show.
No, we're just saying even the fact that you
it.
won't watch it,
Yeah.
even the fact that you won't watch it now because of spoilers is a skill issue.
I might eventually. I got so much shit to watch still. I'm only halfway through with the current One Piece episodes.
I feel
So
that. I
behind.
feel that so much. But I'll tell you this: even years later, for the 10th anniversary, about a year or two ago, I went back and rewatched and even did a full review of Madoka Magica for my old anime review show. And the impact was still there for me. Even knowing what I knew, watching it in its entirety, it still hit. So trust me, it's worth going back and trying to watch, even if you know what's going to happen.
Not to mention that you need the show for the context in the movies.
I'll put it like this: the I cut 'em loose scene in The Thing still manages to get me to a degree, even after how many times I've seen that movie. You know, the defibrillator thing and the hands.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Now,
The thing that always gets me that I only recently found out not a lot of people realized about John Carpenter's The Thing is the ending scene. Everybody, check who's breathing, then you know who the bad guy is.
mm-hmm.
I caught that the very first time I watched that movie when I was like 8.
Yeah. And obviously something like The Thing is going to have an impact on me because of the environment. I mean, I've never been in Alaska, but I've been in something close. Not Alaska and Antarctica. But more importantly, the reason why I say skill issue is I'm at the point where I think people need to stop adding so many buts into what they want to watch. I understand that that's easier said than done at cases, but there's times where it feels like people put far too many effort into why they can't or won't watch something than just sitting their ass down and watching. Once again, I understand we're all grown ass men. We all have lives and all that, but eventually that particular thing runs a bit thin. But I will freely admit that when I first caught wind of this, a buddy of mine was saying that it looked like it was just going to be more moe shit, because remember, we were smack dab in the middle of the moe bubble around that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I had said, look who's doing this. You have Shaft animating, Akiyuki Shinbo's involved, and I already was a fan of what he did with Zetsubo Sensei, and Gen Urobuchi is writing. Something's going to happen. I didn't know what. I didn't foresee the whole episode 3 thing, but I had a feeling something was going to go down. Just because of the people who were involved, and lo and behold, I end up being Negrodamus once again. It's not like I had any concrete proof that something was going to happen. It was just a gut feeling.
It was an educated guess given the people involved.
Mm-hmm. But I think the interesting thing about a good amount of that writing style is I'd say Gen is in that same category as Sanjo in wanting to keep casts small.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I'd also wouldn't be surprised if he ended up watching a lot of chamber plays as a kid.
Yeah, but I think given his Toku influence, his Toku involvement, I don't think he's as hardcore in that idea as, say, Sanjo is, because he handled a pretty decent-sized cast with Kamen Rider Gaim rather well.
And I do consider Gaim to be the kind of turning point with him, because with the stuff that he's done after that, he's kind of dialed back the death count.
Yeah. Again, he's even before Gaim, he was never as bad as Kill Multimino. It was just his deaths were so shocking, and there was enough of them that he kind of got that moniker. Mm-hmm. But even with Gaim, there was a body count, and there was a pretty good body count in Gaim when you consider a lot of factors. But again, most of those deaths meant something. They added something. They weren't just there for shock value. You look at the leader of Team Gaim, Yuya, before Kota took over. Yuya, you didn't even realize what had happened until later on. And when everything came into place, and even Kota realized, oh shit, I killed my best friend, it hit him hard.
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, I'll be back.
Okay. But yeah, that death meant something. It wasn't just there for the shock value. In fact, it wasn't even shocking. It was built up. I think most of the audience already knew that he had changed.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't realize it. So it wasn't a shock value thing. It was building up to create a character moment.
And
to add a value to Kota, making him realize this isn't all fun and games anymore. This is serious. This is real.
I'd say something else that has been a semi-recurring thing is having somebody do the gradual descent.
Yeah.
Somebody who seems to have things more or less figured out, but end up focusing on the wrong things and end up becoming something far worse. The whole road to hell thing. There are two major examples that I'd want to bring up. The first of which, of course, is Sayaka.
Oh yeah. As I mentioned earlier.
Like she ended up when she finally made the contract. She was someone who seemed to be really enthusiastic in trying to play the hero of justice thing, which is something that he and Nasu share in trying to deconstruct. But as time went on, she ended up and a lot of what she wanted ended up getting taken from her due to various acts of fate. She ended up losing her own faith in humanity and becoming a witch, which was used to not only to demonstrate her fall, but also the true intention of the fucking bunny cat.
Yep.
And done right at the same time, and that's the thing when doing this sort of thing. It's you can have a dramatic kill off, but consider it as akin to throwing a stone into a pond. The ripple effects are where it's going to have its value. And then there's the whole thing with Baron. Now, putting aside the fact that I turned him into a running gag for a few months, he ended up being consumed by that idea of the strong survive and him wanting to maintain his strength. That's the bare bones of it. I'll let you go into a little bit more detail if you wish.
Yeah, that was Baron's whole thing, was the strong will survive, survival of the fittest. He was very much in that mentality. And that carried on throughout the series. But as it went on, that need to be the strongest drew him towards the wrong direction. You see that though especially when he takes the Lemon Energy Lock Seed and goes to Helheim and gets involved in all that. And then you see it devolve him into becoming the Overlord. Mm-hmm. Overlord Baron is where he finally reaches that point where his need for power just consumes him.
Consumes him to the point where he abandons his humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was all that mattered to him, was his strength. Even his humanity didn't matter. Though at the end, this is where I think Monk's point about Gen kind of lightening up starts to show a little bit of roots, because as the series goes on, Baron has kind of begun to regain a little bit of that humanity in the later movies and follow-ups. But there's still that part of him there. He understands, he still has that mentality, but he no longer feels he has to give up everything to have that power. That his power that he wants can come from elsewhere while still maintaining his humanity. Mm-hmm. But it took Kota defeating him for him to finally even begin to see that.
Pretty much. And of course, I think part of the reason for that desperation to keep that is keep in mind where he was at the start with Team Baron. Like he was king shit of fuck mountain when during the Beat Writers arc.
Yeah.
He wasn't king shit of fuck mountain just to be king shit. He actually wanted to protect Team Baron.
Mm-hmm.
He had noble understanding, but he sought power as the end rather than the means.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And this also kind of brings up the other side, the other one of the other big common tropes that Urobuchi has with a lot of his work when it comes to his main characters. The ultimate sacrifice. Because both Madoka and Gaim have that. And I think that's something we should definitely explore a little bit when it comes to the main hero sacrificing themselves to finally resolve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
For Madoka, yep. Go ahead.
I was also going to throw in when it comes to that concept of sacrifice. The approach that we have with Emiya.
Well, Emiya's sacrifice doesn't exactly stem from Urobuchi, though.
I'm specifically referring to old man, not Shiro.
Well, I know I know which Emiya you're referring to. All capital letters. But his type of sacrifice, the type of sacrifices Emiya went through, stem more from Nasu than they do from Urobuchi. He just used them with great effect during Fate Zero.
Yeah. I guess. And hey there, Rick.
Rick is muted.
Mm-hmm. It's when it comes to talking about, say, Fate Zero, it ends up getting tricky because there's kind of a Venn diagram between Nasu and Gen Urobuchi.
Well, what I'm saying is that old man Emiya, as you put him, or
Kyuritsugu.
Yeah. Oh, you mean Kiritsugu? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Never mind. When I said Emiya, I was talking about Emiya Archer.
Yeah, my bad for not making that clear.
Yeah, because that's also old man Emiya in a lot of people's names, a lot of people's thoughts.
Unfortunately, but that's the Fate series for you.
But because I would argue that even then, Kiritsugu's character was somewhat established because of what Shiro said about Kiritsugu and how he took on Kiritsugu's wish, especially in Unlimited Blade Works route. Mm-hmm. So Kiritsugu being sacrificial, while, like I said, while it is, I guess my words are still technically relevant, even though it's a different Emiya. Kiritsugu being as sacrificial as he was already hinted at by the time Urobuchi got him. Urobuchi just fleshed it out.
So, sorry to go off on a bit of a tangent with that, John.
No worries. But let's look at Madoka, for example. And spoiler warning for those who've not seen this series. I mean, it's over 12 years old now.
We passed the statute.
Still got to throw that out there. But at the end of the series, after Madoka has learned everything about what goes on in this world of witches and magical girls, and even learning about Homura's desire to save her no matter what, she finally makes the contract, but she makes a wish that counteracts everything that QB was striving for. Finds the one wish that basically will break the curse. But because of how much power that wish needed and how much power she'd used by building all the build-up from Homura, going back in time all the time, she basically had to sacrifice herself to become the goddess of this new world. and be separated from the world. So she basically had to give up her own existence to be the guardian of this new universe.
She essentially became a
Valkyrie?
rather, not even just a Valkyrie. She's technically outside the causality of that world, because that's how it's the only way that she could technically save the magical girls when they inevitably meet their untimely demise.
Yeah.
She is outside the causality of that universe. When you say goddess, this is what people tend to think of when they think of an all-powerful deity, because cause and effect doesn't matter to them anymore.
Yeah.
But
and that was kind of what they were what the whole point was, is that she needed that in order to end this rule of witches and magical girls, she had to give up everything.
Yeah. The big issue there is that if you become acausal, your presence within causal reality itself would just cause it to collapse. So she had to leave.
And we're kind of seeing the after effects to that in the later movies, especially if you've seen Rebellion. Holy fuck!
Mm-hmm.
Homura did not take the disappearance of Madoka very well. Let's just say that.
No, she did not. No, she did not. And now, which makes me intrigued to see what's going to happen with the Walpurgis Nacht movie that's coming out next year.
Walpurgis Nacht? Nice.
Yes, should be interesting. Mm-hmm. And on that same token, we look at Gaim and you see the same thing. He had already given up his humanity essentially because of how connected to the Helheim Forest he had become, the point where he couldn't even eat normal food anymore.
Yeah.
And so at the end, he had to sacrifice himself to basically become the new Adam and Eve of the new gods of a new world.
The man and woman of the beginning.
Yes.
Hajimari no onna, hajimari no otoko.
And
I actually loved that. And the entire reason that the fight eventually came down to everybody, to those two. Oh man, Baron and Gaim for people who would just rather have common writer names.
Banana Man and Orange Man.
Banana Man and Orange Man. Well, at the end, it's banana plant monster thing and Fruits Basket Man. Remember, the Kiwami Key even says Fruits Basket when he transforms. But
but it's for the meme.
I know. The biggest thing there is that was the final battle to see who was going to become the man at the beginning. Because the woman at the beginning had already been chosen the moment she died. It's kind of weird. Watch Gaim, it's great. I love Gaim.
Mm-hmm. Gaim is a great series. I got nothing bad to say about Gaim. I mean, it's not perfect, but the few flaws it has are not anywhere near deal breaking.
It's my favorite from Heisei still.
I do
my favorite from that era.
I do maintain that afterwards you started to see kind of a dialing back with how Urobuchi did his writing.
Yeah.
And of course, it's as funny as it is to do when it comes to the whole death count, when it comes to the whole body count thing. There's been barely that level of body count in, say, Thunderbolt Fantasy, which I'm not going to get a whole lot of opportunities to talk about it aside from the subs rant. So I'm taking this opportunity here, Zan.
Yeah, I figured.
Because now, I wasn't surprised when I found out that a large amount of Thunderbolt Fantasy was inspired by his D&D campaigns, because Season 1 of Thunderbolt was very much reminiscent of Dragons of Autumn Twilight from the Dragonlance series.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of building that particular party. But putting aside the fact that you have a lot of familiar VAs within it.
Mm-hmm.
Something I find kind of amusing is in regard to Shofukan's character, because his weapon of choice, even though he's able to cut with the best of them, his weapon of choice is technically speaking a wooden sword, essentially a bokken. And but the thing is that he has access to a scroll called the Sorceress Index, which has a shitload of magical swords that are very, very, very powerful. And what he's one of the things he's been trying to do for the longest time is collect swords for that index and have them sealed off. You know, he's essentially even with his skill, he's going out of his way to not utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, most of the villains in Thunderbolt Fantasy are ones trying to use it in one form or another for themselves. Whereas he's just using a wooden sword. Of course, him using a wooden sword. I know some people will bring up Twilight Shizuka, but this is not exactly a new principle. It is essentially anything can be a sword if you apply enough power to it. There's different philosophies in both. I mean, one is an assassin, and the other one is just trying to not get involved in bigger shit, and ends up getting involved in it anyways. Because that's kind of how this works. But Zan, I think you can do a better job of explaining the concept of the sword without the sword than I can.
Ah, yes, and this concept primarily comes from what people have seen in Wuxian Xianxia, but also in more militaristic forms of Taoism, and even some parts of Confucianism. The idea of the sword without the sword is that a swordsman, when they have perfected their art, is able to embody the sword. First you hear things like, well, the sword is just an extension of the self. That's like the first step on the path towards mastery. Some of the most famous things you'll see is that, especially in anime or in Wuxian Xianxia, the sword, the person who has achieved their sword heart and their sword intent has gone so deep in the Tao of the sword as to be one with it. They merely need to put their two fingers, their middle and index finger together, as if it's a sword, and use that as a sword. Or they can use their whole hand, or they can pick up a stick on the side of the road and use that. It's because at that point, the sword is them, and whatever they pick up that becomes an extension of them is now a sword as well, because it's part of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A formless blade is one which is the most adaptable and best in combat, essentially.
Yeah, but the key thing here is, you're dealing with a mix, and well, one of the swords that was in the index that got stolen is one that tends to bewitch its users. Essentially acting like the one ring whispering to you to put it on.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was called Seven Blasphemous Deaths.
I don't remember.
Because we've all seen the concept of the evil sword that wants to feed and will constantly tempt its user.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing that. It's just that we're seeing the slow descent. And that's also why Shofu Khan keeps collecting them, because, well, he doesn't give a shit about collecting power. But with that in mind, it was a bit amusing when I saw, looking through this, that he was responsible for the animation concept with Ruby Ice Queendom. which
Mhm.
is probably going to go down as the best written thing that's come out of RWBY, mostly because Luna and Shawcross aren't writing.
Oh!
I mean, not wrong.
Oh,
I mean,
And I've actually
Monk.
seen it, so.
Monk, you're right. Luna and Shawcross aren't writing. They've never written. What are you talking about?
Oh!
I should feel something, but at the same time, there's so much truth here. I can't.
If you want to feel better about RWBY, just go watch our reconstruction.
Shameless plug.
I shamelessly plug anything I can. There's a reason people have started calling me there's a reason a long time ago people started calling me the evangelist of the monastery, and it's now my unofficial, my officially unofficial role.
yeah.
One of many, folks. One of many.
We
This
wear
is
many
true.
hats here.
I wear so many silly hats. I might as well be from the Ministry of Silly Hats. Now, one of the anime I'd like to actually take note here is the newest one, Revenger, because Revenger is, I'd like to say it this way, Revenger is Urobuchi almost going back to form. It's a fantastic story, great romp. There's a lot of mature themes in it, including things like the attempt to take over the East using opium. It's a fictional version of Nagasaki, essentially, during the Opium Wars in China, and how the Chinese and the English both tried to kind of edge in on Japan at that time. The reason I say a highly fictionalized version is because, well, some of the things that happen in it are a little beyond the pale, like the church having an assassin corps. Anyway,
What are you talking about? They've always had it.
no, this is the church having an assassin corps made up of Japanese Christians. That's not a thing. But there's a lot of people that you're introduced to that are interesting characters that die. And the main character that you follow at the end has a bittersweet ending himself. I won't say why it's bittersweet or how, but it's a pretty bittersweet ending.
Which, in all fairness, a lot of samurai fiction does tend to end bittersweetly.
A lot of Japanese traditional folklore and fiction tends to be rather bittersweet.
I guess if I had to go with a Western analog, probably Greece's fixation on tragedies.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was thinking
Yeah.
that myself.
Remember, comedy is only tragedy plus time.
And one thing that I have noticed, there are some writers who are going to lean more into fantasy or science fiction than others. Like, they're going to have a certain genre that they stick to. He doesn't really have that. He's all over the place.
Like, if we look at what he has now, like, technically, on screen, I can already see, like, 3 different genres that he's gone into, and that's minuscule.
If we organize them into 2 very large, broad categories, we have the fantastic, and that's things like Fate, that's things like Madoka Magica, that's things like Revenger, and we have the sci-fi, and that's things like Psychopaths and other parts of Fate. Hello, Grand Order. All Noah. Two very large, broad categories. But yes, when you split it down to the actual genres, it's very varied.
Yeah.
I will.
It's less that he has a particular genre preference and more that he has he just has a writing style that can fit in nearly any genre you put it in.
Yep. Caveat on the Fate though, it still goes in the fantasy aspect in terms of
I'm putting
Which
Fate.
ones?
I'm putting Fate Grand. I'm putting Fate Grand Order and Fate Period in its own little bubble.
We have
I'll
we have a
accept that.
Geekwatch coming up about that at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, I got mental note. Sign up for that because I have stuff about that.
If we stay on you can check the pin messages for what date we have for that, Rick.
Yeah.
As long as it's not in December.
And of course, he was heavily Gen was heavily involved with the scripting and design when it came to Obsolete, which I know we were divided on, but I get the feeling we would have had a much higher opinion if it was allowed to go for multiple seasons.
Probably, but woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Mm-hmm. However, what I see out of that is understanding the ripples that we mentioned, because a large amount of Obsolete is more about the consequences of this easily available mech technology,
And given by aliens who just want it for limestone.
Mm-hmm. And how the world stage has reacted to it. Because I will strongly maintain that if it had been allowed to continue, what you would have seen is a North-South war.
Probably, and you probably also would have, if it had been allowed to continue, you would have seen rudimentary exomechs created by humanity once they did not analyze them enough, so that they didn't have to keep buying them from the aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the necessity of war. You want to be able to source your own shit.
Because everybody always focuses on the hard factors and not on soft factors or logistics.
Logistics wins wars.
Mm-hmm. And I will note that there are some. Obviously, there's some stuff that he's worked on that's just straight game adaptations. There's only so much that you can look into somebody's writing style from that, because they are adapting a work that's already been established. That's not to diminish that kind of thing, because we've seen plenty of times that adaptation is not an easy feat.
Yep.
Especially when you're adapting from a interactive medium to one that's less so, and vice versa, to be honest, or adapting something that has all the time in the world versus something that doesn't, like say adapting a novel or a light novel into an anime or a film.
Yep.
The one thing you have that's working against you is time. I do know that he was involved with the Godzilla anime trilogy, but I haven't seen that, so I can't comment on it. I've heard a lot of people really didn't like it. That being Planet of the Monsters, City on the Edge of Battle, and The Planet Eater.
Yeah, I'd have to watch it to form my own opinion as well.
Yeah, I abstain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm out.
But when it, you know how I ranted about a certain tabletop game trying to ask about whether or not it's cyberpunk. Would you guys consider Psycho Pass to be cyberpunk?
No.
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 I give that one a pretty hard no.
No.
It's missing the one of the bigger hallmarks of cyberpunk, Monk. And that's the singularity and transhumanism.
That I can see, because what's present within it is not far removed from, well, stuff like Minority Report.
Mm-hmm. It's
I
definitely
could see a future in Psycho Pass that becomes cyberpunk.
like the only part of cyberpunk that could even become close to something, or in Psycho Pass that could be even close to cyberpunk, excuse me, is the fact that the Sybil system is a bunch of brains working together to assess people rather than an actual automated system.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I don't care about all of you screaming spoilers. Embargo was up a long time ago. But that's the closest thing. The Dominators work by syncing to a central server that reads the crime coefficient and etc. of the person to see whether they're going to be used in stun mode or kill mode. I don't care what they're actually called unless I'm cosplaying as someone from Psycho-Pass with a Dominator. But the non-lethal and the lethal modes. If their crime coefficient goes high enough, it's lethal mode, period. But that's like you said, that's more Minority Report than anything. There's not enough blend of the mechanical with the human element that you see central to part of Cyberpunk's core structure. So they haven't reached that singularity yet.
Yeah, I think that's something worth making clear, because as you and I have seen, Zan, and as you saw, John, there's a very low standard when it comes to what counts for cyberpunk or not.
Yeah.
Among a large amount of geekdom. Because on one hand, you have what Zan and I went through with the idea of, do you have to do dystopia in order for it to be cyberpunk? And how people just acted ridiculously stupid about it. And on the other hand, there was that whole, is this cyberpunk thing in the Cowboy Bebop TTRPG?
Mm-hmm.
I still have no words for that.
I abstain.
I've already made my piece on that. Go check the musing if you're curious.
And for those of you who are interested in our take on a non-dystopian cyberpunk setting, Geekwatch 102, Building the Equation, Non-Dystopian Cyberpunk. Another shameless plug.
But I do find it interesting that there is a healthy amount of mech work, because I keep being told nobody cares about mecha in internationally, and yet I keep seeing otherwise. Funny that.
If I ever get to go to Japan and I see Giga on the street, I'm going to bug him.
Please record that so we can watch.
No, I'm not going to be Johnny Somali, thank you.
Yeah, please don't.
No. We would just troll the shit out of him.
Yeah, I'm not going to go with the whole recording that or broadcasting it thing. That's just asking for trouble.
Mm-hmm.
It just me going up to Giga and being very simply, how does it feel to know that you're dead wrong? He'll probably wonder what I mean, and then I'll just say the word, Becca lives.
But I think the key thing with this particular variety, and I think this is the reason why Urobuchi does such a variety of genres, is to not typecast himself. And given the attitudes I've seen from certain authors who just do fantasy and just do a certain type of fantasy and nothing else, I can understand why he wouldn't want to typecast himself. If you want an example of that, look at George Martin, and how we'll all be dead before Winds of Winter is ever finished.
Pass.
By the time it's finished, he'll probably be ahead in a la Futurama. But but there is there when it comes to some of these science fiction stuff, there is a recurring amount of I guess speculative concepts, which is obviously part of the deal with science fiction. Even going all the way back to say Blastrator.
Blastrator?
Yeah.
That's a deep cut for a lot of people that aren't here.
Mm-hmm. You know, another case of bastardizing German because we haven't done that enough this week.
Well, it isn't an estet, so it wouldn't be Blasrator. It's just Blasrator.
Yeah. Look, trying to do German is weird.
I did my best, and I think I did pretty well. I still think my Japanese is better, but that's because learning to pronounce it's pretty easy.
Oh yeah.
Learning to build the grammar, that's the fucked part.
That's why I shared that meme in memedom regarding languages.
Mm-hmm. I know.
All I know is with German, all I have to say is I still get smacked by my cousin if I fail to speak German to her.
Which, let me read this off for you guys. When people go off about how English is the worst language, I just want to point out a few things. Our future tense only requires one word. Looking at you, Spanish. Words don't change change meanings depending on tone. Looking at you, Cantonese. We don't live in some bizarre Beauty and the Beast world where we give inanimate objects genders. Looking at you, every Romance language and German. Likewise, we don't have two different words for they because we don't care whether they were male or female. Looking at you, Spanish again and French. There's no formal you because we don't play mind games about whether or not we respect you. Once again, Spanish and German. We don't alter the whole fucking language based on how much we respect you. Looking at you, Japan. The letters and sounds might not be consistent, but at least we have letters and not just pictures. Looking at you, Mandarin. We don't have some stupid fucking tense specifically for talking to two people because some idiot decided a two-person tense was necessary. Looking at you, Arabic. So yeah, I think we're doing okay as a language. And some of our plurals are irregular, but at least it's not like every goddamn plural is just an entirely new word, so you have to learn every word twice. At least it's not like that, right? Right, Arabic? What a dumb idea that would be, huh, Arabic?
Okay, I think you've gone off on or Arabic enough, Mug.
Wasn't him. It was whoever.
I think he's got a few more in him.
But
You're breaking kayfabe, John.
I don't care.
But I've look. I think the reason why English is the world's most popular language is simply because of a lack of bullshit compared to other languages. I know some people will cry foul about that, but don't hate me for speaking the truth. But I'd say if I had to guess as to why the death count has dialed back in the time since. Part of it is likely because he just hasn't been doing stories where a high death count is necessary. But there's also the fact that he doesn't need to dial it back because he embraces his nickname. I mean, his handle on Twitter is Butch_Jen. He's aware of his reputation.
This is a man who does not shy away from who he is.
Well, of course not.
Haven't we mentioned when it comes to this sort of thing that it's important to embrace the meme?
Embrace the meme.
And of course, there is the fact that that unlike some, he actually seems to understand the value of firearms.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know some would say that he has the whole thing of wanting to deconstruct any sort of idealist, but he's subverted that twice. He did it a bit with Psychopaths, but we've already put the asterisk on that because of how he was less involved. But also with Gaim, I'd say.
Yeah, because Koto was an idealist, and he was not shut down. I mean, yeah, he was challenged, but at the end of the day, his ideals were what saved the day. It was just that he had to sacrifice so much to get those ideals.
I'd say if there's anybody who comes close to the idealist who got broken down, it is the man who we blame everything on.
Michi.
Yep.
Fucking Michi.
God damn it, Michi!
I mean, Michi turned back to the light near the end, but it's still
Too
Michi.
late for my book.
Even before he turned away from the light in the first place, Monk, he was a fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
Michi is a fuck up.
There's a reason why every otaku shooting range has not shooting, like the cutout at the end of the range is not the normal one. It's of Michi.
Mm-hmm. He apparently the reason why he had said that he couldn't write happy endings to his stories back then was because he got hospitalized in the early 2000s during the whole SARS shit show.
Ooh.
And he saw a lot of people died around him, and it kind of screwed him up.
I could see that.
Although, given the ending that he wrote with Madoka, I think by that point he had gotten over what happened. Though he has cited Stephen King as an influence.
That explains a lot.
He explains a lot, though he hasn't become as assholishness as Stephen King has lately. And unfortunately, Gen Urobuchi does not have his own drinking game. But I'd like to think that the commonality is just dabbling in cosmic horror. I mean, he outright gave Bluebeard the Necronomicon.
I mean, that works for Bluebeard. Then again, seeing how he is as a saber, yeah, it's not better.
Well, I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on him as a caster.
I know. There's not much difference between the two. Someone who's played the games.
Mm-hmm. And I think we talked about this when we did the deconstruction episode, but I think the key thing with his approach to deconstruction versus what we saw with Anno is with Anno, if when you're doing a deconstruction, it's important to build back up something else it's akin to a ritual burning. And
Anno did. It just took him 20 years.
Yeah. And I think there was also, I'd say, a more clear intent. Like, it wasn't until much later that we started to get the sense that the overall theme with Ava was what loneliness can do to the human mind. Especially when that loneliness is filled and then taken away.
Yes.
But it
Gendo built weird clones of his wife because he was lonely.
I'm not going further in. I'm not going further. Into that.
Yeah, let's not dig into that.
We're walking, and we're shooting Nietzsche, and we're walking.
Go watch Thrice Upon a Time. You'll see that I'm right.
Oh, I know that you're right, and the Vile Eye also did his own little deep dive on him.
Yep. Let's also not forget that even though Anno made both Rei and Asuka potential love interests, Anno gave Shinji best girl in the end.
But
Doesn't mean anything that best girl has a somewhat passing resemblance to Anno's wife. Not at all.
I do not believe in coincidence.
I like to poke a little bit at this because I know that Ava fanboys will freak out no matter what you say, so I might as well just rile them up as much as possible.
I see that Ava popcorn bowl they have in the side.
We fortunately
pass that down.
Fortunately, we don't have any plans on trying to survive on just Ava merch.
This is where my Ava merch would be if I had any.
Yeah. But I think it's a case of it's very interesting seeing the contrast with how they've developed as writers, and this is something I've talked about with other writers, where it is important to have a balancing act because some writers who focus on the darker end of storytelling or the cynical end as opposed to the idealistic end and trying to deconstruct idealism, you notice that after a bit of time they end up going a bit crazy. The ultimate example, of course, is Frank Miller. In fact, I remember on a call once I did a comparison between the way Frank Miller acts versus the way why is his name escaping me at the moment?
What comic?
Junji Ito. I mean, as screwed up as Junji Ito's work can get, even if he kind of sucks at ending, you look at how he acts outside of that, and it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Like, he's on his social media, he's a goofball that posts about cats.
There's nothing wrong with a good cat pic.
And over the years with Urobuchi's stuff, he's had plenty of zigzagging moments regarding idealism and cynicism, but he's definitely not going to ever write an idealist character, I think. But at the very least, at least in the more traditional sense. But at the very least, he has a healthier respect for idealism.
The only time he writes idealistic characters is when he can help them mature to become the better character he wants them to be. Mm-hmm. My examples are going to once again be Kota and Madoka.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, some of his early stuff could be a bit nihilistic, but even the man who created the concept of nihilism as we understand it, outright said that it's meant to be a temporary phase, not something you
don't steep yourself and wallow in it.
Mm-hmm.
You come to the understanding of nihilism, which brings you to a foundation where you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
To become the ultimate man.
Yeah. And although apparently he had said that right around the time he was writing Madoka Magica, he was watching Heartcatch Pretty Cure, which he had said that if he had finished it, he might have considered a happier ending for Madoka. If he had finished Precure first.
And now, since I know he's been watching, Cure Crystal's probably losing his shit over that in the chat.
Keep it in your pants, Cure.
Mm.
Wait, who am I kidding? It's Cure. That probably won't happen.
You know,
I'm more thinking about the changed course of anime as we know it. If Madoka Magica had been brighter than it was,
because I think the reason why a lot of the dark magical girls that came out in the wake of it didn't work is because they only understood things at a surface level.
Yeah, they only went for the shock value.
Yeah. It's like I said earlier, when Urobuchi killed off a character, he put a purpose behind it. There was a reason for it. A lot of those later anime that tried to copy him, they just did it for the sake of the shock value, and it's just like the comic books did the same exact damn thing. Dark for the sake of dark, not realizing the point.
Or they turned the main character
shock
into
value for the sake of it has its purpose, but yeah,
it
gets
got a
overdone.
short shelf life.
Yeah.
Well,
You can't
shock value
rely
for the
on
sake
it.
of the shock value for the sake of shock value can be used sparingly. It's a good tool. I mean, going to one of my favorite comic series, and I know Monk has a particular appreciation of it as well. In Transmetropolitan, there are a few moments throughout the whole thing that are these either an entire Wham issue, like the issue about the children, or a Wham panel that is clearly... It advances the story, obviously, but it was used as shock value for the sake of shock value in universe. And this is I'm specifically referencing the assassination of Vita Severn, the presidential aide to President Smiler's campaign. He's killed because his ratings are falling like crazy because Spider exposed him as standing for nothing and only wanting to become president to fuck with the people. And he has her assassinated, which gets him the sympathy vote. Though you don't know... Well, I mean, everybody reading the comic is like, oh, it was definitely Smiler who did that. But Smiler even says it was just to raise the ratings. It was shock value for shock value's sake. Also, he could become president. If it's a small thing like that... you've done your purpose. But if you make your entire series like a certain magical girl site, oh, did I say that out loud? Then it just becomes like the main character for Magical Girl Site. She's a woobie. She's absolutely a woobie. And for those of you who don't know what a woobie is, go to TV Tropes. She.
Yeah, I give a series like 2 or 3 moments at most of something just for the shock value before you just start going, okay, my care is starting to dwindle very quickly.
Yeah. Let's look at shock value in horror. Most of the
shock value for shock value's sake is called a jump scare, people.
Yeah, and a lot of horror movies that utilize jump scares tend to be not well liked. The more effective horror has always been in the atmosphere of things.
Exactly. And I can actually explain this and tie it back to this whole thing. Because when it comes to a jump scare, like take it for someone from me who doesn't get scared easily. I do like horror. I can enjoy horror when it's psychological, when it's deep, when it's, it's actual horror. But I can't stand jump scares because a good horror, it creates it builds up. It starts small and it slowly builds up. It's just right there in the back of your mind. It's there, and you don't know what's going on. You don't have any clue what's happening. That confusion, the lack of knowledge, the fact that you know there's something going on, but you just don't know what it is. That creates that fear.
Yeah.
The fear of the unknown. A jump scare is instant. It's just that boom. But then you already understand what's going on very quickly, and especially for someone like me who has ADHD, that jump scare gets processed real fucking quick. Yeah, you'll get the startle, you'll get the, huh, but then immediately you're like, okay, cool. You know, it immediately wears off. Whereas real horror, it lingers. It stays with you, especially even after you figured out most of it. There's always those little bits that you don't quite get, and it lingers and it sticks in you, and you can't get rid of it. And that's what the real fear is.
See, it's how I explain, or I showed it to one of my coworkers when I still worked at a sushi restaurant. She'd do like the thing where she just like scare people randomly for fun. She was up there rolling sushi one day, walk up behind her, just slowly lower my head next to her, just sniff her hair and go, "You smell good." That scarred her for hours.
Yeah,
Exactly.
It's like someone on that. It's not just. I know some people will say, and to an extent, Shades could loosely be saying this, but I know he would slightly agree with me on this one. Jump scares don't. People have used jump scares not just for the instant shock value. They have used it as a build-up to the official scare, but as something Shades has, and I'm loosely trying to say, it takes proper build-up. And
Yeah.
The analogy I like to use, and this is one I blatantly stole from Tarantino because he brought it up, is to think of stretching a rubber band.
Yep.
And just the constant process of stretching that rubber band, then letting it go before it snaps, and then repeat the process.
Yeah, you have to have a release intention.
You're not also, Monk, you're not taking it from Tarantino, you're quoting Tarantino.
It wasn't a direct quote. He was paraphrasing.
Mm-hmm.
You're
So
still
taking
quoting,
it from-
so it isn't him. You're still citing your source.
Yes, that's why he said taking it from Tarantino. That's more than enough. Regardless, the point with this is that when it comes to any of the actions Urobuchi has performed with or on his characters in their stories, it has purpose. And that's the biggest takeaway from a lot of the things he's done. He does things purposefully, with a very distinct intent to them.
And I will admit it's something I've tried to carry over into our own work, even if it's just game design, because Zan and I have constantly been looked at certain things and asked if it's something we need to do, and to make sure that it actually has a purpose.
Things should tie in and should mesh well, and if you don't need them, you cut them out.
I'd say the big example of that was the Puppet Master job.
Yeah, we already had other jobs that had that role basically covered, and we're just like, it doesn't really need to be here.
Mm-hmm. And since it didn't need to be there, I decided, you know what, it's getting geeted. But even within that, while you're not going to see me write anything at the same level of, not at the same level of dark per se, or as his early work. I'd say I vastly prefer the darkness that leads to light at the end, in a sense.
Mm.
And I'd say that's more to do with the fact that writing a dark story is easy. This will be my one wrestling reference, but I liken it to how it is far easier to play the heel than it is to play the babyface.
Like that Twitter chain I quoted before we went on the air. Being evil is easy. That's why people do it. It's the lazy man's shortcut.
Mm-hmm. It's fast food, and eating nothing but fast food is not healthy for you. I mean, I like it. I've enjoyed In-N-Out the few times I've had it, but I don't want to have nothing but that.
Yeah.
Now, I've only had, as much as I enjoyed Devani's, I only have that like once every few weeks. Mostly because I mainly get deep dish because I've mentioned before I have a vast dislike for thin crust.
I think we're getting off the roads with this metaphor.
Yeah,
Rails.
getting back on the rails. Um, when it comes to the whole idealism and cynicism thing, I think the reason why this particular debate crops up is a lot of people have this idea, and this is, in a roundabout way, this is something that even Urobuchi has called out. This idea of an idealistic protagonist being boring, and a more cynical protagonist being, quote unquote, more mature.
I mean, has no one ever seen an idealistic protagonist get broken to the point that his idealism becomes very, very scary? Because I have.
Yeah.
Same.
Well, this is another rephrasing of the Superman is boring argument.
Basically.
Oh. And this idea of in order to have that type of story is more childish. This is the reason why one of my favorite Superman films is, or at least in the animated ends, is Superman versus the Elite. No, not that Elite. Although that would be fun.
Yes, it would.
No, but it's basically an adaptation of the comic, and the story is What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way. And the idea of these more edgy heroes that were just as if that were undermined by their own flaws. I'm vastly simplifying the matter, but in more recent stuff, you certainly have an idealist having their ideals challenged, but not exactly undermined. Or you have people who aren't flexible about their idealism and end up drowning in it. Because bringing up Kota again, even though there were moments where he was beaten down regarding his particular idealism, he always bounced back up.
Yeah. The biggest example of that is his battle with Michi at the very end.
Mm-hmm. And I know some people have made the fruit Jesus joke, but I feel like if you're gonna make that joke, then fight the real enemy. Because
I mean, we made the joke too, but we understand more.
If anything, he's fruit Adam. But it doesn't exactly help that one of the fruits involved is named Idun. You know, which is the golden apple in Norse myth.
I mean, Evun, but I'll let that pass because they're Japanese.
Japanese and yeah, we have to grade on a curve when dealing with Japanese trying to pronounce old European languages.
Especially since they didn't see that they weren't using letter thorn at all, even though Evun has a thorn right after that I.
Yeah, it's like I said, grade with a curve, which I feel bad for any Lord of the Rings fan in Japan who's trying to read Elvish.
At least Elvish has a full language behind it. Remember, everybody, Lord of the Rings was just Tolkien creating a story so that he could show his PhD dissertation on the conlang he created.
Which, does that make it the greatest flex in literary history?
Abso-fucking-lutely.
I know, say the least.
I know some might say, "What isn't the Divine Comedy the greatest flex?" No. The Divine Comedy is a soy jack.
I was actually going to say the Divine Comedy is the greatest fodder for a video game series we ever got.
But like it is the equivalent of some of the trashier fanfics. Not saying the Divine Comedy is trashy, but let's not delude ourselves regarding the protagonist being very, very similar to Dante Alighieri.
No, Dante didn't write about himself in the Divine Comedy. Never. Those are all lies and slander. Slander and lies.
Yeah. And fortunately, I know I said that he tries to keep a bit of himself within his writing, but I don't think you're gonna see anybody accuse any of Gen Urobuchi's characters as being Mary Sue-ish.
No, and there's no full self-insert either, much less a Mary Sue Gary's two-side situation. He just puts a little bit of himself into each character, which pretty much any good writer does. That's nothing new.
A lot of people, bad actors especially, have treated the concept of putting a bit of yourself into a given character when writing them as Mary Sue-ish.
No,
It alone
it's only
is not Mary Sue-ish. It's only Mary Sue-ish in implementation.
Yeah.
I was going to say it's like that makes it more human because you're adding that bit of yourself thing you know, and help making more dimension to that character.
Exactly.
well, and as we read earlier, Urobuchi does it so he can relate to the characters and make them more fleshed out that way as well.
Because this is the thing that's well, we kind of touched upon it, but when it comes to the whole Mary Sue concept, there is a lot of people acting with bad faith or just straight out disinformation. To the point where and we talked about this in the past, even where chosen ones are treated as Mary Sues just by default. A lot of people who are doing that are only doing so because as a form of obfuscation, because of the fact that a character that they happen to simp for has been given the Mary Sue label, and they're trying to pull a whataboutism. If you want to see an example of that, the amount of people who tried to claim that Luke was just as much of a Mary Sue as Rey is.
And then there are all those infographics that showed how that wasn't true.
Mm-mm. I never entertained the question because I knew the intent, and the intent was in bad faith. With several of the characters that Gen has done, I'd hesitate to say any of them would be. I can't find a single Mary Sue in, say, Madoka.
No.
If anything, if any of the characters in that were self-inserts, then I have some very pointed questions.
Maybe he just Monk, have you ever maybe considered that Gen Urobuchi is actually the true Moot and he just wants to be the little girl?
God damn it.
Moving on.
I hit Monk with a deep cut from the old internet.
Moving right along before he invokes other early chatter memes.
Don't tempt me, Monk. I might.
But
Not like you're not already tempted yourself. Moving on.
yeah. As far as I will note that sometimes there's a bit of a, you know how I mentioned there's a bit of a Venn diagram when it comes to analyzing his involvement with Fate Zero. We kind of have that with a lot of stuff because how involved he is tends to get a bit spotty with places. This is why we didn't talk too much about Psycho Pass, because that's a good example of that. He's certainly involved, but not the primary voice.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say it seems he's involved in pretty much every Psycho-Pass project to some degree, from the visual novel, to all the series, the movies, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think if there's any coda to go off of, it is the fact that one does not have to stick to a particular gimmick if it happens to blow up. You do not have to be slavish to that. Because he probably could have just kept doing the butcher stuff as he did in the 2000s. But the Urobuchi now is not the same as the Urobuchi that there was 15 years ago. And it's a case of it's something that I always like to see in how someone develops their craft as a writer, because, well, circumstances change, and as we get more seasoned, ideas that we wanted to stick to we're not as interested anymore. Because again, he said that after the whole SARS thing, he likely couldn't do happy endings anymore. Then he kind of did. There's some asterisks involved with it, but he technically did. And you know how we are about technical correctness.
It is the best kind of correct.
Mm-hmm. I think that's as good of a coda as we will get for this. So that is going to do it for us on this particular episode of Geekwatch. As is kind of established, as I mentioned it on Twitter, and I also mentioned it on the YouTube posts. We are going to be doing this early start time going forward, since the reason that I had a later start time is no longer applicable. It also means we'll have a better chance of having less duets. But
yeah, I can actually start making these more often now.
Same.
But as far as what's coming down the pipe, I am going to be doing a couple interviews, one tomorrow morning and one Tuesday evening. As well, on the 11th, Zan and I will be hosting the TGS Hangover Shit Show.
Yay!
In the usual formats, as once again our giant fuck you to the people who keep saying that nothing good is coming out. Just because you ended up regretting playing Starfield doesn't mean that there aren't good things on the horizon.
Hey guys, I hear Phantom Liberty is actually really good. Oh wait, I don't hear that. I know that. Looks at the 200 hours he has in Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah, everybody who was giving me shit for playing Devil's Advocate with Cyberpunk 2077, I want you all to get on your knees and kiss my black ass.
I think a lot of them can probably do it just from standing.
That is true. I'll make sure to eat Taco Bell in advance. Or Chipotle and ask for extra black beans.
That is cruelty, and I love it.
Yes, it is.
Shades, bring a gas mask.
I mean, all we have to do is put a camera in the same room. We don't got to be in that room with them. All of us were on the same side of fuck y'all.
Yeah.
I will agree with you, however, it's still imagining it.
Yeah, the point is, when we come Wednesday, we will be doing the shit show in the usual manner, and covering a decent variety of games. Some of which were brought up during TGS, some of them before or after that I just felt like talking about, and a few I'm specifically bringing in because some people are going to play the black pill shit. I mean, am I denying the sorry state of something like Starfield? No, but I'm also not going to pretend that that's indicative of the whole field, because that's too wide a net to cast, as we've mentioned before. Thursday, Monarch and I will be continuing our look at Brass and Steel, which is looking good so far. I think we're tackling skills next week, or not next week. This Thursday on the 12th. Friday we are tackling. Zan and I will be tackling the next vocation in Planet Bound, that being the Sworn Sister.
Basically, our blanks in the on the world of Aditum.
Mm-hmm. Saturday, the developers of Backwards are going to be coming on because they have 2 new setting books with their particular gothic horror themed Americana. One of them is Back Channels, which is doing a gothic horror Florida, and the other one is Backwood, which is a gothic horror New England. And of course, on Saturday will be the proper return of the Cloister of the Dice, because I'm not leaving the campaign off on them confronting a fucking Leviathan. But that is a story for another time. So until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.